Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 123 of Circle of Fellows. I'm Shel Holtz. I am the Senior Director of Communications at Webcor, a commercial general contractor and builder headquartered here in the Bay Area. And we have a great panel today to talk about a really fascinating topic, the future of communications in 2026 and beyond. So I want to emphasize that this is not one of those list of trends for next year that you see flooding social media. And I think it's gotten worse since AI has made it a lot easier for people to come up with these trends rather than thinking it through for themselves. But we will explore where we think communication is headed based on everything that's going on in the world, including AI. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. But before we get to that, I do want to take just a moment to note the passing of one of our community of IABC Fellows. This happened on April 15th, but we all just learned about it yesterday by chance. And the fellow who passed is Les Potter. And Les was hugely influential to more than one generation of communicators. I think there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of communicators out there who are practicing sound strategic communication because of what they learned from Les. He was a great friend of mine, spent time together socially. He knew my wife, I knew his, and he will be sorely missed. He was chair of IABC. I was on the International Executive Board when Les was chair. And it's a tremendous loss to the communication community. He was not just a practicing communicator, but after he left the corporate world, he was a beloved professor of communication at Towson University in Maryland. I actually lectured for his class out there more than once. So I just wanted to share that for people who may not have heard. I hope he's resting in peace. So with that, let's go ahead and find out who's on the panel today, starting, Adrian, with you.
Great. It's great to be with everyone. Thank you, Shel. I am Adrian Cropley. I am in Melbourne, Australia. Hot today. Great to be on here, IABC Fellow and the co-founder of the Centre for Strategic Communication Excellence.
Great to have you with us, Adrian. Bonnie, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Caver. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I run a company called Reputation Lighthouse, where we do brand and reputation change management for mid-sized companies.
Thanks for joining us, Bonnie. Mary.
Mary Hills in lovely Scottsdale, Arizona. Our temperature is perfect, as it always is in Scottsdale. I am graduate faculty for Benedictine University, teaching out of their business school, and then also on the faculty at the Center for Strategic Communication Excellence. Just glad to dive into the topic.
I'm looking forward to it. And I have to ask, is the weather going to be perfect in Scottsdale in August?
It'll be a little wet and a little hot.
A little hot. Okay. And Zora.
Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, not too far from Adrian. I'm the CEO of Artist Advisory and co-founder of the Alignment People. And I work with leaders and executives on tackling tough problems, finding clarity and taking action. And I'm really excited to be here today, closing off the year.
Great. Thanks, Zora. And want to shout out Anna Willie, who is our, I guess I'm just going to call her our producer, behind the scenes, executive producer. And usually I do this at the end, but I'm shouting her out now because in the document that she sent that enables us to prepare for this, she suggested a potential opening question, each fellow sharing a quick 2026 headline projection, one line capturing your vision for the profession's future. So let's do that before we get into substantive questions. What is your one headline for the future of the communication profession? And let's go in reverse order, starting with Zora.
Okay, I think as we're heading into 2026, communication leadership is entering into a much more pressured time. So not because of just AI, but because the pace of change is relentless and it's outstripping people's ability to make sense of everything. So we need to help them move fast and to bring them along with us, which is quite daunting, but it puts us in a position where we're indispensable.
Terrific. Mary?
I would just say, as I look at the future of the profession, that so much of it is not new. It's things that are maturing, things that are evolving. So I don't think there's going to be any grand flashes. I think what we're going to do is see the point that we're at. So we've made progress. We're just going to keep on going.
Okay, Bonnie.
Transformative. We're going to be transformative. We must, as communication professionals, transform ourselves, and we must lead transformation within our organizations and with our stakeholders.
Good thought. And Adrian?
I was scared as soon as Bonnie was going to be before me on this one, because we think the same here. It's absolutely about change and transition. But let me add that it'll be an exciting time if communication professionals take the opportunity or seize the opportunity to grow their value in organizations, because the moment is now.
Great. And I will add mine. I think we are going to have to be laser focused on building trust. Trust is eroding. AI is contributing to this a lot. I don't know if you heard that the Washington Post created AI generated podcasts that were loaded with errors and factual inaccuracies. And if that's coming from the Washington Post, you know we're in trouble. So I don't think, I know, Zora, you're pretty focused on alignment. I don't know who's going to want to be aligned with an organization they don't trust. There are others who are focused on engagement, and I don't know who's going to want to be engaged with an organization they don't trust, whether it's internal or external. So I think that's critical. Also want to quickly point out to those of you who are watching us in real time, thank you for joining us. You are welcome and encouraged to join this conversation. It is the YouTube live chat function. Bill Spaniel has already shared a comment about Les Potter. So just pop those questions, observations, comments, arguments right in there, and I'll share those on the screen, and we'll factor that into our discussion. So let's dive into it. What are the leaders of organizations, whether these are our employers or our clients, going to be looking for from communicators, and how prepared are we in the profession to deliver on those things? Anybody?
I'll jump in. I think when I've done quite a bit of research on this, of what leaders are focused on, and growth is on their head, profitable growth, transformation with AI technology. How do we transform talent and the skills, and what does the future of work? And then they've got to protect and govern. And if that's the focus of organizations and leaders, then as communication professionals, we have to plug in there. And there's lots of places, certainly we're part of growth. But this transformation of how do we lead transformation, how do we help with the talent and the skills, how do we look at the future of work, and then this whole risk, trust, sustainability, that's very, very important for us as we build reputations and we actually align to stakeholder expectations. Stakeholders are going to have a very different expectation of us and our organizations going forward. We've got a key role there.
One of the things that kind of pop into mind as you were talking there, Bonnie and Shell, you talked about the state of trust, and I think this is absolutely critical to leaders now. They have this opportunity to lead their organizations, their employees, all their various stakeholders to buy into the organization and what it stands for. The reality today, with the amount of misinformation, malinformation that's going out there, that's gone on steroids with AI, is that people are going to gravitate to what is comfortable. And I think Mary said it earlier, that it's not change. It's what we've been doing for years, but it's literally amped up now. So what does that mean to the role for a communication professional? It is absolutely about giving those leaders the information, the insight, and the advice that they're going to need. We have to be the sense maker more than we've ever been before. And the role that I think is being added to that mix, and we talk about ethics a lot, but there's a morality role that comes into play now. And I know when Bonnie and I were doing our work with the Venice Pledge for the Global Alliance this year, it was a theme that was popping its head up, saying it's more than ethics. Ethics is at the heart of what we do, but there is this, how do we engage our world, and this happens through our organizations and our leadership, into the fact that it's more than trust. It's home, it's security, and I have to say it ties in with a lot of what Laura talks about in alignment as well. It's absolutely, we have a role as communication professionals to make sense of things and help organizations navigate it through with the leaders.
I've been talking to a lot of leaders this year in the research I've been doing, and there's a lot of talk, but it's also happening in real time. The pace, the speed at which decisions are being made, strategic horizons have shrunk a lot. We're constantly trying to outmaneuver the competition to try and grow, to try and win at whatever in whatever sector we're playing in. So there's this complexity, and I think comms professionals need to be looking at how do you make sense of that, which is what Adrian was talking about. So it's looking at the system overall and looking at what's happening in all different sorts of places. What are the actions being taken, the decisions being made, where is money being invested? And we could look at it from the perspective of, say, trust, for example, and say, is what we're doing there, is that going to reinforce trust, or is it going to erode trust? Because ultimately, you're right, there is a gap between what leaders say, how they behave, and where they invest, versus what employees see and versus what stakeholders see, whether they're inside or outside of the organisation. And communication professionals have a role to be able to make sense of that as a whole and bring it back to leaders to help them make better decisions.
So I guess I was going to say, I guess I'm kind of the last one, but I think that I may have a few data points that are worth considering. I mean, I can state mine pretty succinctly in terms of, I think that the communication professional must finally, again, this is nothing new. Communication professionals have to be interdisciplinary. They can't just stay in that silo of comm. They're going to have to understand the business. They're going to have to understand the economics. They're going to have to understand the value and risk model every organization is on. Otherwise, you really can't play the game. You know, you just don't know the rules. I think the other thing is, in communication, we balance the vision and the mission of the organization. That's what we do. We are the short term and we are the long term. We are the keeper of that. So I think you have to find that harmonious balance in your organization. And there really isn't another function in the organization other than marketing to a certain degree that is going to be able to bring that type of conversation. And then I think we certainly have to work in the profession itself. We have ethics. We just have to work with an applied ethics model. That's what we have been struggling with. We can easily attach it to the pesto situation analysis we do. Just add ethics right in there. It's a piece of cake. It works well. And then I think the other thing that we would have to really look at is rigorous professionalism. I think we have to be emotionally intelligent, and I think we better start looking at behavioral economics and see what are the behaviors that foster that discussion within the organizations.
Shell, I'll jump in and just ask the question of you, Shell. You're working in-house now. What is it you're hearing from your organization, what their expectations are of somebody, because they've got one of the best working for them, but what is it they're expecting you to do?
I think they're expecting me to tell them, to be honest with you. These are, we are not a large organization, and everybody in the leadership team, with the exception of the chief people officer and the chief financial officer, has a construction engineering background. So they're expecting me to help them figure this out. And I think that's something, if you're not working for, a mega corporation, a Unilever sized or an Exxon Mobil sized company, I think even if they don't articulate that, that's what they're expecting. And Adrian, based on your thoughts, the first thing that leaped into my mind was that we had better get a lot better at listening than I think we have been. What are your thoughts on that, everyone?
Absolutely. And we don't have the excuse not to listen anymore. And we don't have the excuse not to measure. And this is where I think AI has really helped us. And I know this is not an AI topic today, but it's absolutely shaping the world for good, particularly in our profession, because what we don't want to hear is, we're no longer going to have a job. We no have to no longer write, whatever else. I've been waiting for this day. I never liked writing. The reality is that the skills, and I think Mary has nailed it with the emotional intelligence skills. She'd also enjoy context is huge here. So the context in which the organization operates, like you said, Shell, leaders are wanting you to tell them. We need to be so much better at listening, helping our leaders to listen, to get the insight to inform true connection with the various stakeholders, whether it's our internal or it's our external audiences. And so listening has become critical. And I know we focus on that, and Anne-Marie and Howard in the UK, with True Communication, they're absolutely experts in helping organizations through listening and understanding, and it's a really key leadership skill that they're bringing into it. So I think we're going to see a lot more around that. How do we actually listen with intent to do something with that information?
I wrote a piece about this in my newsletter last month following the interviews that I did, and it became really obvious that what was missing was true listening in the organization, but also as a capability amongst leaders at all levels to actually understand how to listen to understand rather than to respond, and to be observant of what's happening outside, and to have those feedback loops that they need to have and actually be able to action them and work on them. And despite the fact that we know all this is like somewhat obvious to us, it's not actually being done well in organizations from the research that I've done. There was one particular person who is a chief comms officer, and she works in a professional services space. And she spends a lot of time listening in fishbowl, for example, where there's lots of conversations that happen outside of the business, but it's people within the profession talking, and a lot from their organization. And she gathers all this sort of stuff and she takes it back into the executive and says, this is what I'm hearing, and this is why it matters to you in this business, and this is what we need to do about it. So she's actively doing that, which I think is exactly what needs to be done.
I'm seeing a lot of people just skipping the listening. And in this world, especially, I mean, not only internally, but externally, we're not talking to our stakeholders. We're not listening to and having conversations with them about the transformations that are happening. We're not educating them, but we're also not listening. And, we're seeing that when we get to misinformation and disinformation, and we're seeing AI bots that are controlling the narrative. We don't know that. Do our stakeholders really believe that way? Do they really think that way? Because we haven't asked. We haven't had that conversation. And so when we have bots that take over and try to control a narrative to come after us from a reputational perspective, we can't give them the bird and say, we know that our customers don't really think that, because guess what? We haven't asked. So in this world of AI and misinformation, where so many people can control the narrative, and then we even have challenges today with fake surveys. I have a company that sends me stuff all the time that shows the level of surveying that's going on and how many fake surveys are being participated with, and how that is changing the narrative. So if you're thinking you're going to go out and you're going to survey your customer base and you're going to make critical decisions, but people are getting hold of your survey and they're making they're participating in a way that AI is participating, they're totally changing your playing field and the decisions that you're going to make. So true listening, picking up the phone and talking to your customers and your stakeholders, both internally and externally, to the people that are going to influence the way that you're making decisions, is more important than ever before.
Well, I think the one caution that I would throw out, and I spend quite a bit of time on the marketing side, we watched 10, 15 years ago, Peppers and Rogers talking about the one-to-one relationship, right? And the consumer, the stakeholder network, got so tired of the irrelevant questions we were asking. So if we're going to go out and we're going to have the conversation, we better have our own background research done. I think this whole idea that we can have these fast conversations and that opportunity is going to miraculously come in the next 72 hours, that has exhausted the stakeholder network. They're tired of giving feedback. They're tired of being asked. So I think we have to really look at how can we make that more effective. And I think the skills that we have as communication professionals and the new rising type of leadership that is called discursive leadership, and it's actually probably over 10 years old at this point, but we have the skill sets to have those discussions. It's not the 5 questions and we're putting it out there with a close-end answer. It has to become more open-ended. So I think we have to begin to go back to the skill sets so many comm professionals have, discussing.
Mary, I was just going to say just quickly, the reason people are tired of us asking questions is communication is not coming back to them of how we're acting upon it. We're not making changes. We ask you your opinion. We ask you what you'd like for us to do. We ask how you'd like to buy from us, but then we never make those changes. And we never communicate back why we made the decisions we made. So it is that opportunity for us as communication professionals to be a part of that loop and to make sure that loop is closed.
Yeah, I was just making the point to somebody yesterday. This was an internal communications conversation, but they were talking about survey fatigue. And I said, there's no such thing as survey fatigue, but there is certainly bullshit fatigue. If I'm going to constantly ask you questions in a survey and I'm never going to come back to you and say, this is what we're changing based on the answers we got, then who's going to want to take a survey? But if they see that the survey is leading to change that they articulated was important and it makes their lives at work better, they'll take surveys all day long. So we do have a question from our live listening audience. This is Bill Spaniel. I think this is a great one for you to start, Mary, regarding the emotional factor of communication and need for listening. How can communication schools build in requirements for those in their curriculum?
And we have been doing that. Out of the strategic communication program that I taught out of, we've actually been doing it for a good 8 to 9 years. So again, this is not something that isn't out there, but it really requires within the active experience of learning that you use the same skill sets there. And a lot of it is making it happen in the classroom. And I'll tell you, it's exhausting because you are on a graduate class is 3 hours. So for 2.5 hours, you're constantly on and keeping that. And again, it's not about, I heard what you said, and this is the action item. It's agreeing what the next action item is. So I think we're still looking at surveys that are coming in from consumers, and we're looking at them as data points. No, they're thoughts, they're opinions. They require a discussion. And that's what we're reinforcing, especially in the small group, large group, any of those type of things, and really fostering that whole idea of it just closing the loop is not enough. You have to carry on the conversation.
And I'd love to build on that one, Mary, too, because I think there's the skills part of it that needs to be developed. Yes. And I know with the Center for Strategic Communication Excellence, a lot of the programs now that we're offering, we've built in relationship building skills, listening skills, emotional intelligence is now core to a lot of the programs we're doing, because what we're seeing is this shift, and obviously the academia section are doing market are doing exactly the same. Is we've got to be able to build relationships with our stakeholders now, and the relationships are not just coming from the surveyed insights, it's coming from a number of different places, particularly now where data is easy to get to. And what you've got to be able to do is do the stuff that people don't have to do anything about, is get the data, the insight, where they're going to. We've seen marketing do this for years. Where do people navigate to? How long they're staying on pages? All of those pieces give you some information. Then you've got to overlay it with the right context, and that's that true listening stuff. As Mary was talking about, is truly understanding the context for them, and therefore you can build the relationship. And I think that's what's critical now, and that's why we're now starting to teach a lot on relationship skills and emotional intelligence.
When I was then doing my undergrad in marketing many years ago, we had a subject specifically on interpersonal relations, it was called. And so we learnt through practice how to do this. So it was designed into it. So that was part of the marketing degree, but it's not in the comms degree.
Speaking of many years ago, in another epoch, I read a book some of you may have heard of called Excellence in Public Relations and Communication Management. And I learned a new term there. It was boundary spanning, which means, you might look at this, this is almost a, kind of a trigger word to apply to it, but it's surveillance, right? It's lurking in the conversations that your stakeholders are having and gleaning intelligence from that. I mean, listening isn't just asking questions and getting answers or having a conversation and extracting intelligence from that. I mean, listening is sometimes just listening, isn't it?
Well, there's a thing about social awareness too, isn't there? I mean, yesterday, yes, there's chaos of Christmas shopping, and I was out and I was in this shop, and I turned around to this young guy, and I went, "Oh, you go first." And he just It was as if he looked through me and just went and got served. And I went, back in the day, my grandmother would have given me a clip behind the ear and said, at least say thank you. And so there is this awareness around it. It's almost like a social awareness, because if you can't even connect with people as people, how are you ever supposed to listen, understand, and get that context? I think we need to go back to some of those old skills, right? Maybe without the clip on the ear.
Is that also being observant? You're not necessarily participating in the conversation, but you're observing the people in the room or the conversation that's being had, and observing what could be unsaid as well, which would be part of listening.
I don't want to linger on listening too much. There's so much else to talk about, and we're already halfway through here. But listening strikes me as one of those things that, it's an uncomfortable truth, as one of you noted in the preparatory document for this conversation, that we need to face if we're serious about staying relevant. And Bonnie, as you say, you find a lot of people who aren't doing it at all. What other uncomfortable truths are there out there? The things that we need to face up to if we're going to stay relevant with our leaders and our clients and our audiences?
I think we confuse activity with impact. So we're really good at producing stuff, but we're not always good at understanding whether it's changing behavior, or whether it's making an impact on decisions or people's understanding. So I think it's about being relevant more than being busy, and helping people make better decisions, and being honest when what we're doing isn't working, and being able to measure it, which we don't do enough of.
Well, and I think, again, nothing new under the sun, right? But we had the communication values circle that came out, I want to say in 2016, 2017. And I think it really, relevant is a good word. However, I think the word that we need to understand is, how do we provide value and assess risk? And those are the things that keep you relevant, right? So you look at the communication values circle and you look at, how do you impact present value, and how do you impact future value? Well, that's that balance between the vision and mission that compros we're the only ones who do that. So I think we have to understand the value and risk model that is out there, because I think the marketing value circle came out, I want to say maybe 2019. And again, it's all built on value and risk. So I think those are the things we need to understand. Where do we bring value in the short term, but how are we protecting value in the future value, which is really the vision of the company? So I think value would be the focus that we really need to catch on.
Yeah, while you're on value, Mary, and it's resonating with me at the moment as I'm reflecting on this one. Often the perceived value from the leaders is what's driving the behavior of the communication professional. So is this vicious circle where the communication professional churns out content or tidies up the PowerPoint or whatever it is that they're doing that they shouldn't be doing, but the leader says, but that's value. The problem is that value disappears and has disappeared in the last couple of years because anybody can tart up the PowerPoint or produce an article and whatever else. And we can argue whether it's best quality, whatever else. AI is getting so much better to do all of these things. We have to educate and take leaders and organizations on a journey to what real value for communication actually is, so that we can be seen to be adding that value and they get that that's the value that you add. Because I can almost guarantee, organizations that employ strategic communication professionals and they they are doing what they are needing to do and providing that insight in that context, they're seeing value very different to the organization that says, my perception of communication is you produce stuff and get it out there. Well, we don't really need you anymore. And that's why this becomes a really serious conversation. You're either going to become irrelevant or completely relevant. And it takes into account all the relationships, building those competencies in the human skills and taking the journey on that relevance and value journey.
It comes back to the business side, doesn't it? You know, I distinctly remember learning the concept of net present value and, you know, the metrics around that. You know, I've done risk calculations, I've done finance, all of those sorts of things. Comms skirts around the edges and avoids understanding how to express it in things that matter to the business. So, you know, talking about revenue, talking about productivity, talking about trust capital, resilience, you know, exposure to risk, all of that sort of stuff. We need to change our language, but actually you were talking about the business side earlier, Mary. That's completely fundamental, and it's still not being done well enough. So we need to lift ourselves up.
And I would agree. And so many of the topics that we've talked about, this is not the first, you know, time we're hearing these. We have to build trust. We have to do this. We have to do this. But I do, Zora and Adrian, I like the way this whole idea of creating the meaning of what value is, right? And in the organization, and recognizing what's the language they're using. In fact, I think the marketing value model goes into that. We have to fill that in. We have to bring that value to the table and know exactly what it is in the terms that they can understand. So it's really knowing your audience, you know, and who you're talking to.
Building on that risk that you started talking about, and I will defer to Bonnie on this one, because the huge risk right now, as you talk about value and the risk, is that organizations will fall off the reputational cliff if we don't get this stuff right. Because you've got organizations that say, right, you added value by writing stuff. I'm going to now write stuff for myself. But when they're missing the context that you bring as a communication professional, you risk the organization where everybody is communicating out there, and suddenly reputation's going to be in tatters. I'm not sure whether you agree with that, Bonnie. But...
No, I think reputation is huge right now for organizations, and CEOs are saying reputation is one of the most important things. I'm very focused on it, but they don't know how to do it. They know that it's important to have a good reputation, but they don't even know who in their organization to go to unless they have a chief communications officer that sits on their team. And part of that is we have not talked as communication professionals that we are in the business of building and protecting reputation. And we've been thinking so much about reputation as being a byproduct of crisis management. And we're looking at reputation management. It's not about reputation management anymore. It's about reputation design. It's about accelerating your relationship with your stakeholders for what you want to be known for. It's about the do, say, are. And so that means that we as communication professionals are getting into the operational side of business. And let's not forget, AI is now a stakeholder. AI now controls the narrative in many cases. AI now talks to your constituents. When you are Googling, you now have AI that's answering the question and giving the narrative about your organization. So we have a whole new level of what reputation looks like. And as communication professionals, we should be leading that. I've been talking about communication professionals leading reputation for 15 years. But we constantly have this thinking that it's issues management, it's reputation management, and it's so much more than that. And we've got to come to the table with that today.
What else are communicators not focused on that they should be? I mean, I think in the we've talked about listening, we've talked about defining value. There are other things that communicators tend to, kind of stay away from. That if we're going to be relevant and valued in 2030, what do we need to start to embrace?
Can I mean, one thing that jumps straight to mind, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be tagged with talking AI today, is understanding and actually starting to interact with AI. I am still so very surprised how many people have not dipped their feet into the water here. Because if we look at the journey over the last couple of years, and I'm having a session right after this with our AI forum, is if we look just in the last 2 years since AI became the popular term through ChatGPT, we've got thousands of different models doing thousands of different things, right? And it's not that we need to be across all of those things, but we need to understand what it is that's going to help us do the value stuff that we need to do in communication. Right? And so if we are not in there exploring and playing with AI to our advantage, and when I say advantage, it is how is it making our roles much more efficient? How is it giving us the insight that the organization needs? Then we're missing a huge opportunity as communication professionals. And what I'm hearing is we still don't have time to get into it. And just recently, we've published the playbook for AI and into 2026. And one of the key plays in that playbook is that we've got to be using AI to carve out the time to do the stuff that will add that greater value to the organization. So I'm sorry, I'm tying the two topics back in together, but I think it's important to understand that skill is developing your AI acumen. It's so important to do. So for communication professionals, they really need to add that to their skill set.
So one thing I just want to toss out there is, and we do this particularly because we have requirements of where the students in our classroom can use AI, right? But the one discussion that we always, or at least I do, is understanding AI isn't a communication professional. It's just not. It's an agent, right? It goes out there. You are the owner of what AI is bringing back to you. So you put your inquiry out there. That's your inquiry. And it goes out and it gathers this information. But it's doing what it thinks you're asking it to do. You own all that. So it's good to get that summary. But just like an agency relationship with people in comms and marketing absolutely understand an agency relationship, right? And so you have to understand, how do we go back and forth? So under when you're experimenting, when you're in the sandbox, right? Playing with AI, you're telling it what to do. You are the owner. It is merely the agent acting for you to go get that stuff. And so I think if we understand that, it's a little bit easier for us to realize how we can, at this point in time, manage what it's giving us back. Because it takes that, it always says, would you like to do a deeper dive in AI? Well, sure, why not? And you can ask more questions. But I think that's what we have to understand. That's our agent that is going out and getting that information for us.
Good point.
I think it's
I'm gonna-
also, Adrian, we're not looking at solving problems with AI. So what are the efficiencies that we want to go for? What are the things within our organization that having AI would allow us to do more? I was on a panel last night with an organization that's like saved almost 1,000 hours in efficiency by utilizing AI. And they have a very small team and they're able to do so much more. But what I loved about it is they were using the efficiency to free them up to do the transformative things in the organization. And once they got the things that they maybe didn't want to do and the things that they were able to be efficient in, then they were spending their real time in being amazingly transformative and moving the organization forward so rapidly because they weren't doing, as Zora said earlier, the stuff. They were doing the transformation, which is huge.
And it's a real, I think, a critical skill to be able to teach the agents. And this is something, Mary, you and I have talked about for quite a while now, is that we are about educating the models, educating the agents to do what we want them to do. So we are still the person that holds the critical information, as you were talking about. And that's critical. So if we can use it to simplify the tasks, so we can outsource some of those things because we've taught it to do it in the right way, then we can add that extra layer of value to the organization that they need. I was going to say want, but there's two different things. It's what they need versus what they want you to be doing.
I'm going to jump in and comment. The thing about AI, what AI is doing is it's creating this incredible speed and pace. And so there's the need to work at AI speed, so to speak, which is really exhausting on everyone. And the problem with it, it does still come down to alignment as well, because people are shifting and moving at speed with decisions, with strategy, but they're not really able to create that clarity around what stays the same, what has shifted, what hasn't, where does the focus really sit? Does everyone really genuinely understand it? Can we have the conversations that we need to around it? Can we do the listening piece? Can we get the feedback done? All that sort of stuff. So to me, it's around how do communication professionals enable that alignment that's needed across the organization so they can work at pace and basically be able to do it in a sustainable way, because at the moment it's just not working. I mean, when less than 10% of employees are actually aligned to the organization's goals, which is what research shows, that's a massive problem.
We've talked about the need to be transformative and the transformations that are happening in communication and organizations and society. There are some things in communication, I think, that we would like to have fixed. Professional standards, ethical behavior. We don't want to transform those. It's getting harder, especially given that a lot of the people doing communicating are not journalists and not communicators. I shared with you before we started an article I read from the Neiman Journalism Lab by somebody who spends a lot of time with the Haitian immigrant community. And he talks about who's doing reporting there. Just read this again for folks who are listening. He says the people keeping their communities informed aren't reporters. They're the pastor who delivers immigration updates before the sermon, the barber who streams local politics on Facebook Live, the neighbor who translates every school notice and distributes it through 5 different group chats, the teacher who explains American bureaucracy to families who arrived last week, the WhatsApp moderator running a rumor control operation that outperforms the mayor's office. How do we maintain professional standards and ethical behavior when we have so much less? I don't know if the control is the right word, but I'll use it because in the absence of another word, when we have so much less. I mean, we had more control when we were working with journalists. We got to know them personally. We had lunch. We could talk to them and wield a certain amount of influence. But now the people doing the communicating are not those people anymore. How do we maintain those standards in this media environment?
I love you use the analogy about journalists, because there used to be something called journalistic integrity, right? Because it was the standard. And I think it's not that we're short of standards within our profession. We've got them there. What we don't do is a bit cobbler's shoes, to be perfectly honest, is that we build these things and we use it within ourselves rather than getting it out there to the wider world. So I want to use a couple of examples. Obviously, things like the global standard for the communication profession, a lot of work that Mary led a number of years ago, is absolutely critical stuff to give context to what we do as communication professionals. But we've got to be able to build those standards out to everybody that is communicating that there are guidelines, there are rules and regulations about it. And I think this is where we've really come to this erosion of trust, is because we won't trust anything that comes out from the media or through social media, and so we just kind of isolate ourselves from it. Other things that I think are really important, I'll use another example, and this is the work that Bonnie led with the Global Alliance to the Venice Pledge. How do we use AI and what are the guidelines around that? Now, a great example around taking it wider is that the Global Alliance, through that work that Bonnie started, are now having conversations with big end of town. So whether it's United Nations or other major organizations, to say we need to put some policy guidelines to help people in this way. Because I think it's a free-for-all right now, and people don't want to be limited. But I think we've got to have what looks good. So our role in communication is to try and advocate for getting that stuff heard. So it's great that organizations or associations like IABC and the Centre are members of the Global Alliance is taking that good work and saying, how do we inform our global profession on the standards that we want to use? Because it's not that they're not there, it's how do we actually apply it and get them used globally.
And we have a question based on your response there, Adrian. It's directed at you, but we'll take anybody's answer. Bill's wondering who can enforce those requirements.
So my quick answer to this, and I'm really happy for others to jump in on this, is that we need to be working with our governments and the agencies that they're putting in place around this to put those guidelines in place and enforce those requirements. Now, a great example right now, and I'm glad you deferred to me, and I'm sure everyone will have different opinions on this one, is only recently Australia has banned social media for under 16s. And when I say banned social media, there's a certain amount of apps that anybody under 16 cannot use. Now, I'm finding this is going to be the big social experiment to see whether it is actually fixing the problem of online bullying and those types of things, or it might have a negative impact. So we're in research now and doing this, but I know the world is looking at Australia right now and going, oh, this is really interesting and how we're going to do it. But until we start making this is right and this is not right to do, and there's a huge context piece in there, then I think we have a problem, because it's a free-for-all. And I think the comment I made earlier about we have to go back a few generations, and there was a morality there is what is actually right and wrong, and you should and shouldn't be doing. We've kind of blurred those boundaries now. So I think if we look at context in organizations and society, then we need to put some of those governing things around it, and it comes through our governments, I think.
Well, and I think just looking at where we were with the global standard in 2012, right? And then we came out with the assessment what was that, 4 years ago, 5 years ago in IABC, you know, there is that role for what we call the professional association level. And they're the ones who really, if we look at the body of knowledge of the field, generally we think that is driven by academia. You need solid research. You need all of those kind of things to build that body of knowledge, right? But it's the associations that really are the ones that are the keeper of the standard. So I think that, you know, you've got to have, for any number of things. I mean, I have credentials on the marketing side. I have credentials on the finance side. You know, I have Six Sigma on the operations side, right? So I think that whatever that body of knowledge is, whatever the professional certification and the associations are the ones that really have to bring it into the marketplace. Zora, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that and bringing it into the marketplace.
Oh, look, I think about, I don't think we've ever had control. I think that's an illusion. We've always had influence, right? So through the relationships that we've had with media and various structural sort of channels as well. So I think we need to double down on the stuff that we can work on, which is what Bonnie was talking about earlier, about do, say, are. So, you know, making sure that what we do, what we're talking about, and what the lived experience is true. So when people are talking about it outside of the traditional sort of channels, you know, we can have some impact on that. And we need to be listening to those channels to make sure that we're aware of what's being said. And if we need to shift things, we can. Yeah, so I think the listening becomes much more critical, and being across what we actually do and what we reward in organisations is fundamental, because there are so many gaps in that space.
But believe it or not, we're almost out of time. And again, Anna, who provided us with the opening question, has also given us an ending question, which I like. We'll go around and get your response to this. In one sentence, what's your boldest prediction for communication by 2030? Adrian?
So I would say absolutely radical change is my prediction. Is we're going to find out we are changing completely.
Bonnie?
We're going to become advocates for ourselves, or we're going to disappear.
Okay, Mary?
I would say that what is a natural inclination for people in communication in the first place is to bring to the forefront the human-centric abilities that are needed. They will protect our space, right, and our role in the organizations. But I think the whole idea in the behavioral economics, the emotional intelligence, I think it was Mary Ann Macaulay who wrote a chapter in one of the books years ago that said, we have to be the ones who are keeping our heads when everybody around us is losing theirs. And I tell you, the last years, boy, oh boy, I should have that put on a poster and put on the wall.
Yeah. Zora?
That's nice. I think that communication, if we do this well, communication should be the essential organisational infrastructure that creates that shared understanding across an organisation to bring people along, so we can keep the strategy, keep the trust, keep the performance from falling apart.
Hey, our fellow John Clemens is watching, and Bonnie, he said, spot on. Before we go, I want to let everybody know about January's Circle of Fellows, which is scheduled for noon Eastern time on Thursday, January 22nd. The subject is the impact of mentoring. I have been mentoring a young woman. This was arranged by IABC San Francisco like 3 years ago, and the program ended, and we still talk once a month. So it's a great experience. Our panelists for this Circle of Fellows will be Amanda Hamilton Atwell, Brent Carey, Andrea Greenhouse, and Russell Grossman. So that should be a great conversation. Yeah.
Nice.
And my thanks to all of you for a sparkling conversation. I mean, we got through, I think, 4 of the questions that I had on this sheet. But, you know, as I was telling you before we started, I'd rather have a great conversation than get through every question with a Q&A. So very grateful for your participation and your insights. And to everybody watching, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Ready.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye-bye.
holidays. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.